Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors on staff at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So as a piece of that, our goal each week is to bring you something that's hopeful and helpful. So subscribe to this podcast to make sure you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge podcast. If you find today's episode hopeful and helpful, then please follow or subscribe, and then rate and review so that you... Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge podcast. If you find today's episode hopeful and helpful, then please follow or subscribe, and then rate and review so that more people can find the conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give us a follow and turn on your notifications. This week, we share the second part of my conversation with lead pastor Mark Weigt on parenting. And we're going to specifically dive into the second part of his and his wife's goal statement. And that second part was to equip their kids to live on their own. This is part 2 of my conversation with Mark. So the second part of your goal statement was to equip your kids to live on their own. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, like I said, we were looking ahead and going like, hey, someday we're going to have to release them. And when you first have kids, you don't like to think about that because you're like, oh man, it's so awesome and all that stuff. But you got to think about it because you're not going to have them forever. And so I remember when I left for college, and there was just things that I was like, well, I don't know how to do this and do that and do this. And then you're figuring stuff out on your own and you make a bunch of mistakes naturally when you don't know these things. And so we just began to think, okay, we're raising them to release them. How can we prepare for the releasing? And so they are as ready as they can be to begin now to experience life without us there. And we just from an early point just said, okay, let's start creating some of these things strategically speaking and empowering them and equipping them to do those things. So like, for example, early on, it was like, okay, we're going to teach responsibility. And it was funny. We were one of the only parents that did this. And some of the parents looked like we were nuts, but we've never made our kids lunch. We never did. We said, you will make your own lunch. And they were like 4 and they were like, they don't know how. They know how. You just train them. You train them. You go, no, you are responsible for you. And so it was always fun to do that. And we always made it fun and all that stuff. So we never once made our kids lunches for school. They were always responsible for things like that early on. We gave them chores early on. Like, I think they were 6 or something like that. They were doing the dishwasher. They would clean, they would dust and vacuum and stuff like that. With this little vacuum, they would do that. And we just said, no, this is what you do. And so we just started doing things like that from a very early age. When they started elementary school, I taught them how to manage finances, and just a real fun way. I took these 3 small bowls, and I had give, save, live labeled on it, and I made it like really fun. And I was like, okay, guys, and I had like ones. I took a bunch of ones, and we're like, okay, you guys are going to start getting money for allowance and for Christmas and just all that stuff. And okay, here's how we manage money. We give God to first, we save because we need to always make sure we have a rainy day fund, and then we live on the rest. We don't live beyond. And so we did fun things like that planted seeds. And as they got older, they'll tell you right now, give, save, live, give, save, live, give, save, live. And the kids going into school, they got a job. We got them a job at age 14 when they could. And man, they worked and went to school and had to manage that whole thing. But they did give, save, live, and they saved a bunch for school. It just was kind of cool. It all came around for them. And I just go, man, I wish I would have known some of that stuff before I left. But it's just been kind of neat to now just watch them put some of those things into practice. And it was worth it.
Was there like a planning stage in that whole thing where you're like, oh, we want to make sure they have, like you mentioned the responsibility thing. Was it like, we want to make sure they have these 4 principles that they know and these 4 life skills, or maybe it's, I wish I would have done that, but we didn't really,
Yeah. When it came to just like life skill stuff.
Yeah.
Right. We had the principle of you are responsible for you. All right. God you are responsible for you and your stuff. You don't make other people responsible for you and your stuff. And so we said, well, then we just made a list of what are those things that we want to start equipping them with. And then what is the appropriate age? And then we just would start slipping in things. And so it was kind of fun when they got their job, let's just say. So when I taught them give, save, live, for example, I didn't go, okay, you guys need to open up a mutual fund now. You're a first grader. But it was, hey guys, let's talk to you about investing when they were in high school. And we had them all take a personal finance class. And that was part of, then we talked about it through that filter. Okay, guys. And then we opened up a mutual fund for them. And then we taught them how to make, deposits into that as they earn money and then do things like that. So it was just things like that, John, that we thought through what are the basic important life skills that they need. And then how do they move forward in some of those things? We didn't get them all in, but we got as many in as we could.
Yeah, no, I love, there's just like a principle there that you didn't think too little of their ability, but you also didn't expect more than was fair. And I think that's a wise place to be in, because like you said, you're not teaching them mutual funds at 4.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. And I think here's what we do. We tell our kids this, and this is not, and I understand why we do it. Okay. But this actually, it doesn't help them. We say, you can do anything. Well, no, you can't. Okay. I mean, the reality is that
you heard it here first.
My parents would have said, you can do anything. Well, I want to play in the NBA. Guess what? I wasn't playing in the NBA, and I worked my rear end off. I didn't have the athletic skills or the height or anything like that. I wasn't playing in the NBA. Okay. So we got to be realistic. And we've always said this then to our kids, that's not negative. That's truthful. In fact, what they're finding, research is finding that kids actually are hurting from the fact, well, I thought I could. Why can't I? And so what we do is we want our kids to operate at what we say is their competency level on things. And so I wasn't going into it going, all my kids, they need to be getting straight A's. But if I felt like their competency level was straight A's, then we said, yeah, hey, dude, you should be operating at a straight A level.
Yeah.
But if that wasn't their strength, if academics wasn't their strength and they worked their butt off and it was all C's, that's okay.
Yeah.
That was okay with us. And so it's just really important to just really manage those things, but always raising the bar to go, guys, no, you can do better. You can do more, and not from a pressurized standpoint, but going, no, hey guys, we're not going to lower the bar. We're going to raise the bar for you. And then we're going to lovingly walk with you through it.
Yeah. What would be a separator between doing that in a way that's pressure filled versus a way that's, I guess, a healthy, because there's a healthy pressure, right? Like there's like there's like an incentivizing, there's like a, hey, this is, you're trying to help them. So there's that pressure to help them grow, but not so much that it's crushing. Yeah.
And here's the thing. We don't always assess the situation right. All right. So we just got to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But I can remember this one time. So one of the twins, I mean, they're both just smart as all get them. All right. They're adopted. They didn't get that from me, obviously. But I mean, they're just smart as all get out, and they're hard workers. And we had to, once again, that's another conversation. We had to teach them hard work. Parents get mad at their kids because they don't work hard. And it's because for most kids, hard work is taught. And so, okay, they were doing great with the hard work thing. And then their competency level is straight A's. I mean, A- or whatever.
Sure.
So one of them came home with a report card that was below that, and not just, it was like a 3.8 something.
Yeah.
All right. So it was dramatically below that. And I remember going, okay. And I knew why. So I remember just, first off, I didn't say great job to him. Going like, hey man, great job. You did well. I didn't do that, because first off, that had been false praise for him. I didn't say bad job, but I didn't say anything. Instead, we went out for what we call our Dairy Queen run together. And we sat down and I said, hey, so what do you think of this grade point average? And he goes, well, still good, Dad. I go, yeah, okay. It might be. Is it good for you in what God has gifted you to do, in the mind that he's given you? And we just had this conversation where I just kind of walked. I didn't get mad at him. I wanted him to take ownership. And this is the key. The pressure is parents go like, you can do better and you got to do better. And kids can feel that. Parents you go to a sporting event and you can see the parent yelling at the whole thing. And you just want to go, you're making it worse.
Yeah.
You're making it worse. He's not taking ownership of his results. and his competency. And so I just sat down with him, and then we just walked through it. And I just go, so why do you think you were below what you think you could do? And he just began to share with me, well, Dad, I was probably lazy here and I didn't do this. And okay. I said, and I always say this to my kids when situations like this, I'm not asking you these questions for me because I don't want them to think that I'm digging for this I want to let them know I already know the answer. So this is for you. This is for you. I want this for you. And then it got to the point where he shared some of those things. And I go, okay, so what do we do different next semester? And then I said to him, okay, can I then hold you accountable for that as you go through it? Yeah, go for it, Dad. And most often that's enough.
Yeah.
It is. That's enough. We got to give them ownership. Raise the bar, but give them ownership of things when they don't own up, when they don't measure up to what they're capable of, not to what our standards are. There's a difference between the two.
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit such a good premise there with understanding that you're not wanting them to do well for you, and I think that you can probably, obviously not parenting, but in my own self, like I can reflect on when I want something for me, it's like, then there's typically that little bit of anger, or there's that emotional attachment that's like, oh, this isn't for them, it's for me, and I think that might be a good barometer as parents are walking through that. Like, where's this emotion coming from? And is it truly to just serve my kids well,
Yeah. And I think once again, if you're equipping them to live on their own, that's what that conversation does.
Yeah.
Because what are you going to do when they're on a job or whatever, and all of a sudden they're doing the same things on the job that they were when they were with you, and you haven't equipped them to walk through that and to create standards for themselves that are higher. And that takes involvement.
Do you think that there are any, maybe you get a chance to talk with a lot of parents. Are there misconceptions that you've noticed parents having about parenting?
Well, once again, I always laugh and I always think about this. I said, hey, when that baby gets put in your arms the first time, he or she doesn't come with an instruction manual. So it'd be great if they did, but they don't.
Yeah.
So because of that, one of the misconception is that we just automatically think we know how to parent. Because we are a parent, we think we know how to do it.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we don't. None of us does. And so parenting is something that has to be learned. And it's okay to go through that process of learning it. And so that's one misconception. And another one is we think that the masses know the best way to parent our kids and raise our kids. And we go, well, everyone else is doing it, so it must be okay. Yeah. I would constantly read this article, and please, as I give this example, I'm not endorsing spanking your kids, okay? But I'm not endorsing that. But I'm just saying, I constantly read this article, but this is the type of critical thinking we need as parents. It'd be like, don't spank your kids because it makes your kids angry. And because I just read this parenting stuff, but then I thought to myself, we are seeing the most angry generation we've ever had, and they're not spanked. But no one asks those critical questions. Once again, I'm not saying you spank your kids, but I'm just saying that no one just looked. It's because it was published and it was put out and all that stuff. Everyone just goes, yeah, that's right. Actually, no, the premise is wrong. We have a very angry generation. And so there's got to be other root causes of that. So anyways, it's just things like that to listen to the masses. And then another misconception is that our kids aren't better off necessarily. Our kids are facing greater challenges than ever before. And if we don't get very intentional about that, our kids, it's like just walking into a black hole or stepping into a black hole for them. And so we need to be even more proactive and intentional about what we do as parents, just because I would hate to be a kid today, man. It's really tough. Yeah,
it's so interesting. I think about some of the things with like social media and things like that. And I'm not super old. And I feel like I just, cause I was in high school at the start of Facebook, and, but there's just a lot of those different elements of pressure, and it's that interesting balance that you mentioned, right? Where you are giving them a healthy boundaries and healthy pressures to grow. but not adding an extra voice to the craziness that they're facing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, you mentioned a little bit of this piece when you're talking about your boys saying, well, Dad, you didn't really face this thing. Because there's so much new, and especially along the lines of like technology and things like that, is there anything, like how do you have that type of conversation, right? Where it's like, yes, you are facing this new manifestation of that, but you obviously still have a voice in what they're facing.
Yeah, I think what I would often say to them when they said that, well, Dad, you don't face that. Well, first off, I would acknowledge that that's true.
Mm.
I think it's really important versus, yeah, but I walked, 10 miles to school in the snow. I mean, that's what we as parents tend to do. And not realizing that our kids just all of a sudden checked out, disconnected. That's what they're thinking. And I would just say, man, you're right. I didn't. And I don't know if I would have handled it well. But here's what I do know. You talk about kind of the principles and you bring out the principles of the thing. They're still the same no matter if you're my age or your age. It's just a different vehicle now that it's expressing itself in. So we still have to wrestle through these things. You have to wrestle through these things just like I had to wrestle through these things. And so you kind of take it off of that part, you acknowledge it, but then you take it away from that and look at the larger principles that are at play there.
Is there a portion of that where maybe you realize into yourself like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm not great at dealing with my people pleasing. Maybe we'll use that, for example. And so when your kid is wrestling through that, it's like, shoot, I don't know.
John, so, I think as parents, here's what I discovered about myself. The thing that I was hardest on my kids on, or I focused the most on, were the things that I struggle with or struggled with the most. Man, that was a clear pattern. And so I didn't, part of me is like, I don't want them to make the same mistakes I did. And so I overcompensated for those things. And I think 99% of the parents do the same thing. And we channel that because it was a struggle for us or is a struggle for us. It's very common. It's this very same principle. The things that you see people railing on in culture the most are the things they struggle with the most. It's the same thing. And as parents, we do that. I caught that. I didn't pick up on that right away, but I picked up on it when the kids were in their teen years for sure.
How do you resolve that?
Oh, I don't know if I ever did. To be honest with you, I don't know if I ever did, except for acknowledging to the kids that this is a struggle for me. I remember the people pleasing thing when that came out. And they were like, Dad, do you wrestle with people pleasing? I said, every single day. And they're like, still? Isn't this like and they'd be like, don't you get over that? I said, you don't get over it. If you don't deal with it, you don't get over it. And I said, I still wrestle with, and I'd use examples and all that stuff. And I said, guys, I still wrestle with this today. And here's how I wrestle through it. And so I use it as an example of not going like, hey, it is what it is. It was, nope, this is true of me as well. So here's what I'm doing right now to let the Holy Spirit just begin to do a work in me and to work that out. And it's a constant battle for me.
I think that goes back to you talking about modeling the faith and the taking steps, right? Because you're talking about, then they're seeing what it looks like to work through something you're struggling with, right? Versus, oh, Dad has all the answers that will magically cure everything, right? It's like, no, sometimes you have to see, hey, I'm working through stuff too. I think that's really powerful.
Well, I think as parents, we think we overcompensate in things like this. First off, one compensation is because we want to try to befriend them. All right. That we go, well, I need to connect with them and then get them to like me. And yet I struggle with people pleasing. And what I'm doing, I'm trying to please my kids. I mean, we don't realize they're one and the same. And so we overcompensate by going, hey, it's okay. And no big deal. And man, you and me both. And, let's be buddies about it. And then do nothing. It's like being friends at school. No one does anything about it. Then the other one is we judge them for it and we're hard on them for it. And that doesn't do anything either. And so there has to be this, hey, I get this and understand this and honesty about it. But at the same time, you don't have to settle for this either. I'm not going to settle for it. So as a parent, you got to parent them. And a parent knows when to be tough and tender. And Jesus knew when to be tough and tender. It's just brilliant when you just kind of look at Jesus. And this is one of those times where you go, hey, I'm going to be tender, but hey, you don't have to settle for that. And here's what I'm doing. And it's tough. And you know what? You can do this as well. Let's wrestle through this together.
I love that. Well, Mark, as we kind of wrap up our time, I'm curious, just in your message, was there anything that you like, man, you really wanted to talk about it, but you had to cut it? Maybe we've actually even discussed it with our questions. I'm not sure, but was there anything that you're like, wow, I wish I could include this, but as we all know, nobody necessarily wants a 2-hour message. So
yeah, no, they don't. They don't even want a half-hour one when it comes to when Jody and Tyler and them speak, they do. But when I do, it's shorter, for sure. Yeah, one of the things that I'll talk to parents, I'll ask them this question: what do you think your kids want the most? And most of them, if they're honest, will answer, oh, they want experiences and they want to go here and they want this vacation and they want all this stuff. Okay, they want to be able to do what they want to do, technology and all that stuff. Actually, you know what kids want the most? I mean, survey after survey shows this. They want their mom and dad to stay together. That's what they want the most. And so when you take that answer and then you go, well, God has what's kind of cool. I'll just call it this for lack of a better way of saying it. God has an organizational design for family. And it is God, husband, wife, kids. And it's in that order. Now, what's the problem with in today's culture is we've completely flipped that. And the kids are running the house and they're running mom and dad. And then God's falling behind and being disconnected from the family because the parents are chasing the kids, which means they're chasing culture and just all that stuff. But the beauty of God's design is it says, hey, the health of mom and dad will actually determine or go a long way in influencing the health of your parenting because it'll be an overall family covering. And so what Donna and I did with that, we said, okay, first off, we're going to have them for 18 years. And then Donna and I are going to be left behind. And so, this is where most parents, that once they lose their kids, they don't know what to do because now they're left with their spouse. And they're like, now what do we do? Because, we've been ignoring each other pretty much. The kids have been running the place. I've been married to the kids for 18 years. And now I got to get married to you again. And so what Donna and I did is we just said, we will prioritize our marriage over our kids. Our marriage is more important than the kids. And so we kept date nights. And early on, we wanted to model what a marriage was like for our kids. And so what we did was when Donna and I would like be hugging or showing affection, if I got home and if one of the kids tried to get in between us, which is often happening, and we did some reading on this, we just said, no, this is mom and dad time. And they had to wait for mom and dad time. And then we'd be like, okay. And here's the thing. You think, well, that's me. No, they loved that. Especially when they were little, they were like, is it mom and dad time? We're like, yep, mom and dad time. And they loved that. And we made it fun. And I would call Donna, okay, she's the queen of the house. And you guys aren't the queen. Ellie, you're not the queen. Hey, you're not, no, it's mom. Mom's the priority. And it was just that constant thing that we did to set the stage of our marriage matters most. And here's the thing. We know you guys want this the most. And it was always great. And so we've modeled for them what a godly marriage looks like. And it was just fun. The other thing is that most of parents, we kind of just mentally put this in there. We want our kids to be like us in a lot of ways. Whether it be, we don't want them to make the mistakes that we did, or we want them to some way, be a lot like us and just whatever. Hey, I like sports. I want them to like sports. I like, all that stuff. And we got to be careful of that. And that's just a real blind spot that we all have. And just, I had it. We got to be careful of it. And then the other thing, two last things, John, is when we really understand that our kids are a gift from God, we will live open-handedly with our kids. Right now, there is such a close-handedness with our kids where everything is insurance and seatbelts and, pads and just, our kids don't get that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have seatbelts on I'm not saying it, but it's this idea of we overprotect. And we've always had this saying with our kids, we're like, we want them to fail with us. Let them fail because they're going to be on their own. And if they aren't experiencing that now and learning from it, they're going to experience out there when they're not with us. And so how can we just live open? Hey, these are God's kids. He's entrusted them to us. We don't have to grab our home. No, if something happens, no. God's entrusted them. And then the final thing is there is a real hungry for God in this generation. There is, man. I talked about this week. And it's just cool to see what God's doing in this generation. The Asbury revival, one of the things that was so cool of it, and every revival has certain characteristics if you study them throughout history. And we talked about this generation being the anxious generation. How people described that went to Asbury revival. They kept describing it, and they said it was a revival of peace. There was just this peace and stuff around the place. It was just fascinating. And because that's what this generation's hungry for. And this is what they're looking for. And only their Heavenly Father can give them that. And the more as parents, we don't have to be shy from that. No, lean into that. Well, they don't want to. Who did want to at that age? But be faithful. Be faithful and encourage, but take the lead and be consistent. And man, God is doing something in this generation that is so cool. We read all the bad stuff. Man, God is doing some really good stuff in this critical generation. So I could talk about that all day, but just excited as all get out for our kids and our students and young adults. And we get the chance to steward that, man. Don't take that lightly. Elevate. Don't follow the masses. And lean into what God is doing and what he wants to do in our kids, because it's extraordinary.
I love that. I also love that you end with just the cool, positive stuff that we're seeing. I love that. Mark,
it's awesome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing. I know that this is a heavy thing for a lot of parents, and they're just trying to figure out, am I doing it well? I'm trying to figure everything out. And thanks for taking the time to really help parents and future parents along that journey.
I love it. Like I said, you heard all the bright spots, but you didn't ask me like, what mistakes did you make? And I'm glad, because we could have been on a 2-hour podcast then. That's good. So,
next one. Yeah.
If you feel like a failure as a parent, welcome to the club.
Well, that was part 2 of my conversation with Mark. And I want to thank him for sharing all those helpful tips and wisdom. And I want to encourage everyone to head over to our Relationships on Purpose resource page, where you can find more hopeful and helpful content for parenting and the other relationships in your life. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast. Make sure to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations.